management, or sponsors.
Are you a family caregiver? Are you caregiving for someone who can no longer take care of themselves? Are you overwhelmed? This is Caregiver Solutions Info with Marcia Teele. Marcia will be hosting an hour of true stories and information, tips and updates of the latest research and necessary information in the caregiving field, focusing on you, the family caregiver. An Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert, Marcia has 15 years of hands-on experience at Arden Courts, a leader in assisted living dementia communities here in the U.S. Marcia covers everything you need to know as a family caregiver, especially if you care for a loved one with Alzheimer's disease or other related dementia or chronic illness. If you have a friend or relative that is also a family caregiver, call them now. They won't want to miss a minute. And let them know they can watch on caregiversolutions.info. And they can listen on WNN 1470 AM in South Florida or nationally on the iHeartRadio app. Now, sit back, relax, and learn from our host, Marcia Teele, as she brings information to you that may just be the caregiving solution you need.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Caregiver Solution Info Show. I'm glad you could join us today. This show is for family caregivers. If you're a family caregiver or know a family caregiver, then you know it's a very difficult thing to do. It's very challenging. There's so much to learn, so much to know. This show was created just for you. So we hope that you're going to learn some tips and some information that you can use to make your caregiving challenges just a little bit easier. One of the things that we all think about is aging. Everybody ages. That's something that we all have in common. Aging is universal to all of us from the time we're born. And if you're an adult child and you have been dealing with your aging parents, you know how frustrating sometimes that can be. And you know how difficult it is sometimes for communication, figuring things out, what to do, what not to do, even for ourselves. When we age, what are we going to do with our lives and our future, and what is that going to look like? So these are things that we want to talk about and discuss today, and my guest is the perfect person to do that. His name is Dan Laganni, and he is the CEO and founder of Silver Solutions. Silversolutions.com is the website, and he's with me here in the studio today. Hi, Dan, and welcome to our show.
Marcia, thanks so much for having me. Thrilled to be here.
I am so glad that you're here. I'm excited to talk about this today. This is a universal topic. You have been teaching and preaching to people about this topic for a long, long time. The Silver Solutions is a senior-focused home services company, right? And you, CEO, co-founder. What exactly does that mean? What are some of the basic services that Senior Solutions provides?
So we do three things, and I like to look at it as sort of age 65 to end of life. We take care of the physical environments that your mom or dad or loved ones are in. So we start with senior home safety. Mm-hmm. We go on to downsizing and relocation. And then ultimately we'll work with families after they've moved or downsized or after a loved one's passed away to help empty the home and distribute all the treasures to the right people in the family.
Wow, what a great service. I mean, it really encompasses a lot of things. Now, I know from your past professional life that you have been the publisher of the Better Homes and Gardens magazine and also the president of the Reader's Digest of North America edition, among many other endeavors that you've had. So the question is, how did you transition from that life into what you do now? Was there a particular reason why you did that in working with seniors?
You know, it's a great question, and I look back on it, and it feels like it's a planned event now. You know, that I look back and say, isn't it interesting how everything that I've done has been always surrounding home or family, and those two worlds have come together as I'm getting older. I think the reality of it is probably for most of us, you wind up on a path, and then certain things happen that take you down that road and at some point provide you with a natural next step. And I think that's really what happened. I was very much interested in the content of things like Better Homes and Gardens, where it was about making the spaces physically better. And I became good at the media side of it, and I wound up working in a bunch of different media operations. But I think when the time came that I got involved with running the parent company of Reader's Digest in North America, they had gone through a bankruptcy. It was a sort of a classic mid-2000s, financial story. A private equity firm bought them out. It didn't go so well. They brought in management after the restructuring of the business, and I came in. And along the way, what I realized was what had been a liability for a long time for Reader's Digest, which is that advertisers want to market, still to this day, to their detriment, to younger people. If you're over 55, you're not that interesting to an advertiser. Less so today. There's more interest there, but the truth of the matter is it was really a world of 18 to 34-year-olds. They stretched it out to 18 to 44, and if you got to 54, they were still interesting. But by the time you were over 55, you really were not interested to most national marketers. And as we know, now especially as that I'm over 55, I realize what a missed opportunity that was. But the long story is I realized helping to rehabilitate that brand after its bankruptcy wasn't going to be about advertising. It was going to be about finding other things that brands would have an interest in over 30 million adults over the age of 65. So how do you reach them?
Exactly, because now with the silver tsunami, as they say, with all the baby boomers,
Right.
and things are leaning that way. And we do see more now geared toward the older people. But, you've been doing this. You were probably at the cusp of it and started it. And so, good for you.
And the road took me to understand that what AARP had done with United Healthcare around their Medicare supplement insurance was extraordinary. And I thought, boy, we've got a lot of people that are really loyal to this brand, that are older. Who else would be interested? Not United Healthcare, because they already have a partnership with AARP. And we wound up doing a deal with Humana to create co-branded Medicare Advantage policies and to test Medicare supplement policies under the Reader's Digest name. And it opened really without planning a whole new world to me. And at that point, we became so immersed in that I recognized not only was it smart for me as I was getting older to be in a world where there was still value that I was creating and participating in, but also that it was enjoyable and necessary. So that's how I started to transition at that point slowly from a lifetime in media to now my current focus, which is senior advocacy and helping make growing older safer and easier and less stressful. So unplanned, but in retrospect, I guess there was a broader scheme that I didn't see.
Well, everything happens for a reason. And I don't think you know this, but I worked for Humana for many, many years. And I've also been in the healthcare field, working with seniors, helping seniors, sometimes from the doctor's perspective and helping them communicate to each other and understand each other. And so I think that's really cool that you were involved in that too. So I want to talk about specifics now, because you mentioned the 3 areas that you feel are the most important things that as we age people kind of struggle with, right? And the first one, you talk about life safety solutions. Now I remember I'm a Better Homes and Garden reader for many, many years, and I do remember when there were articles in there about being safe, fixing your bathroom up so that it's safer for an elderly person. And so that is something that we all have something to look forward to, is making our home safe. So, having to age in place. Now, most people want to do that. That's usually their first preference. And so how does Silver Solutions see that as helping a person age in place at home?
Well, you hit on a really important statistic, right, which is that whether you look at AARP information, we've done several surveys, 9 out of 10 adults will tell you that given the choice, they want to grow older in their own home. Now, there's different definitions of what that means, but what's clear is we also become more mobility challenged as we get older. And I had my own sort of revelation last year when I had hip surgery. And, at this point, I don't think I'll ever be in another bathroom in my life where there aren't grab bars. It's just one of those things that it doesn't matter if you're 55, you're 65. Frankly, I would say the way the world works at 35, water and marble is still slippery. So you should have grab bars. But it is the first and most fundamental thing that we will look at, and that is the space keeping up with the changes that your mom or dad or loved one are going through. Somehow we don't pick our feet up quite as much. We shuffle along a little bit. Our eyesight becomes diminished. All of those things that seem innocuous when you're 25, suddenly at 65, really need to be thought about. And so many times, as you know, that mom or dad have been in the house for 35 years. So the stairs didn't really matter before. It was a matter of course. It didn't matter that you had to climb 2 feet over the edge of the tub to get into the shower. And you didn't even think about having a mat in a bath mat on the floor of the shower. But now all of those things matter. So we start out with really what we call our safe living solutions. And it's simply a trained eye to go through and identify those things that just become problematic as we get older. And it doesn't mean that you're not vital and independent. Frankly, it is the way to stay independent for as long as possible.
So are you talking about simple solutions like grab bars, or are you talking about a whole remodeling perhaps of maybe a kitchen because the counters are too high and a person now is in a wheelchair and they can't reach the counters or reach into the drawers? I mean, is it small, large, or does it custom fit?
It really spans a pretty wide spectrum of things. We'll do everything from really decluttering and reorganizing things that are as simple as the way the kitchen is organized, where it may have been fine in your 30s or 40s to get on a step stool and reach to the top shelf to grab the casserole dish. When you're 83, it's probably not a great idea to let mom do that anymore, right?
Yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense. I recently installed the drawers that slide out, and you can open and slide out and get to those casserole dishes that are heavy without having to hunker down and squat and take everything out first and put it all back in. And I'm thinking, this makes life so much easier.
Right.
And that is a great solution for people, but sometimes people just don't know that it's available, or they don't think about it until something happens, right? And so we want to be prepared. And I think that's one thing that you're talking about, is being prepared as we age so we can age safely, right? What are some other examples besides rugs that might trip us, or things we can't reach up high? Some other examples of aging in place for safety?
We go through really a 60-point assessment when
Wow.
we go into somebody's home. And if I broke it into the major categories: lighting, surfaces of floors, organization within cabinets, decluttering, and looking for things that create trip and fall hazards, right? If you look within the details of those, you tend to now get to grab bars in a bathroom are a critically important way to ensure that as your stability changes and you're introducing again something that's a problem even when you're younger, which is water on slippery surfaces.
Yes.
Grab bars are simply a smart thing to do.
Yeah.
Right? But we think about what's interesting when we have young kids, we think about night lights, but somehow we don't seem to pay attention to it at the point where our eyesight at night starts to get bad, right? So we go through and we look through, no pun intended, with a very critical eye at all of those things that keep your home to be a safe haven. And if left to its own devices, as I used to joke, Reader's Digest or Better Homes and Gardens magazines were wonderful until they became 30 years of issues that were stacked along the stairs or down the hallway, and now suddenly became something that slid out onto the floor and you stepped on. The most basic thing that everybody in the business knows, and unfortunately that everyone who has an older loved one finds out the hard way: slip and fall issues are prevalent. 1 out of 4 adults over the age of 65 falls every year. Many of them wind up in the emergency room. And for far too many of them, those preventable issues become the beginning of a quick downward spiral.
Exactly. I was just going to say, sometimes that's the beginning of the end. Really, I've seen it happen so many times with those broken hips. Wow, this is great. But we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, more with Dan Laganni on aging successfully. We'll be right back.
Arden Courts is not just a place to live, it's a place to call home. Residential living combined with quality caregiving. This is the philosophy behind Arden Courts. Communities created exclusively for individuals with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia who would benefit from a safe and structured environment. For additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides, call 888-478-2410 to locate a community nearest you. Inquire about our educational seminars, resource library, or support groups, or simply feel free to ask questions you may have about Alzheimer's and related dementias. At Arden Courts, we know, we understand, and we can help because memory care is all we do. Remember, call 888-478-2410 for additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides. You are listening to your host, Marcia Teele, an Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert on caregiversolutions.info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
My guest today is Dan Laganni, and he is the CEO and co-founder of Silver Solutions, silversolutions.com. It's a senior-focused company based on helping people to age gracefully, and we are all in that boat. And so I'm so happy that you're here with us today, Dan, and we're talking about things that we can do at home, things that we can implement at home so we can age in place and be safer. One of the things that Silver Solutions does, besides keeping people safe at home, you mentioned that you help them downsize and relocate. But you also say that that's a struggle for a lot of people. So explain, why is that a struggle for downsizing and relocating? And are you talking about relocating to another home or relocating away from your home, or there's different places that people can relocate? So you want to go ahead and talk about that, because I think a lot of people are in that boat these days looking at other options for senior living.
Well, I think the simple answer, the way that we discuss it internally, is that downsizing and relocation encompasses both things. Finding a more suitable space, which sometimes still means that somebody's living independently. The house that you were in simply may be too big. It was great when your kids were younger. It was great when you needed 4 bedrooms, but you don't need that anymore. And a lot of times, even though in South Florida there's a lot of single level living, in other parts of the country, you still have a master bedroom that's on a second floor. And now you have something that simply is not as functional as you're getting older. So in those cases, people want to downsize into something that's smaller, more comfortable, and generally has a master bedroom on the same floor. But the other thing that's happening for a decent percentage of the senior population, about 10% at some point in their lives will wind up in some community-based setting. And the easiest one to sort of understand where we support is assisted living. All right, now I'm going from living on my own and I'm moving into a community where there's a certain level of services that are provided to me. So you've got the issues of the emotional decision, which is difficult. And then the second part of the question that you asked is, how do I get my things? What do I do? How do I take a life's worth of possessions and now move them from, I had 4 bedrooms that I collected and filled over 40 years, into a 1 or a 2 bedroom apartment in an assisted living setting. So it's difficult physically too.
It is. I have some friends right now that live in Cincinnati, Ohio, and they've like just exactly what you said. They've been in the home for over 40 years and they're moving to be closer to family in Texas, and they have to get rid of things, and they're having a really hard time with it because they're attached to their stuff, and they don't want to leave all their stuff, but they don't have room for all their stuff. So that's hard. But are you saying that you can actually help people figure out when they downsize with that emotional problem? Is that part of your service?
Well, we're typically getting called in by families or the older adult at the time that they've made a decision for one reason or another that the current space is simply no longer viable. Now, what's interesting, because our services, and we talked about a little bit earlier, the safe living solutions that we provide, which another way of saying it is we do the things that allow you to safely remain in your current house for as long as you want, or as long as you possibly can. In those cases, there are times where those families will call us back and say, had a conversation and mom thinks it's time for her to move into a smaller space, or dad is struggling with his memory and we're looking to move him into a memory care facility. Can you help? And that's where we get brought in those conversations after the decisions have been made. But what most people don't contemplate in the process of making that decision is not just the emotional hurdle, but now it's, whoa, how do I actually deal with the implications of it in terms of my things? And how do I get my things from point A to point B?
Yeah, it just seems to be overwhelming, for people to deal with that. So having, somebody that is not so emotionally involved probably helps, that's looking at things more objectively and logically, right? And saying, well, this will not fit in your new space. It just physically will not. That baby grand piano is not going to fit in this apartment, right? So it helps with, just looking at things and looking at reality, I guess, from a different perspective.
Marcia, we call it starting with the wish list process, right? And it is really, what are the things that you love the most? And let's get the measurements of them and compare them to the space that you're moving into. Because again, if you love that baby grand, that's wonderful. But if it can't fit into the one-bedroom assisted living community, then you either need to reconcile with letting it go and finding the right home for it, or maybe there's a different solution as to where you need to go next or where you want to go next. But, I think it's a great surprise to a lot of people that they get through, and I see families struggle with this all the time, specifically with respect to assisted living. You go through the emotional outpouring of recognizing your parents are getting older, your mom or dad who's going through the move has to deal with the fact that they're going to lose a certain amount of independence in the move.
Right.
They get past that hurdle, then they realize it's expensive. They get past the money hurdle, and then it's, oh, we're going to do this. And then you find out you are responsible for getting your things from point A to point B. So it's a resource that's critical that most people don't think about until very late in the process. And so we start with the wish list process and we make it easy. And we manage the process from beginning to end, from identifying the things that are going to make you feel like you're at home in your new space. We ensure everything gets packed and delivered and unpacked and settled in, and that your space is recreated so it has the feeling of what you know and love, but fits comfortably and safely into your new space.
Well, you don't even have to be a senior to benefit from that service, because there are a lot of people I know that cannot make those decisions on their own and they just need help. So I think that's a great service. And the other thing that you mentioned as the top 3 things that you provide for people, they also struggle with the emptying of the home, like emptying it out, and what they call the family distribution. What does that mean? So
when someone has gone through the process of a downsizing or a relocation, very often they're coming from a larger space. It's not simply that I'm in a 1-bedroom and I don't like this one anymore, I'm going to move to a new 1-bedroom. You're dealing with moving from a footprint that's bigger to a footprint that's smaller. So you still have many things that are left over, and it's the question of, what do I do with the balance of my possessions? Families will deal with that after mom or dad move. And very definitively after a mom or dad passes away, or a loved one, if it's an aunt or an uncle, and sometimes it's your own spouse that you're wrestling with that with. And in those cases, we're there to help the loved ones figure out how to find the right next steps for their things. And that means in some cases donating, in some cases selling, in many cases finding the wonderful treasures, if you will. And I use that term broadly because I'm not simply talking about a $10,000 ring that grandma had, but it's really about the things that evoke what family was. And we all have those, right? It was the Christmas stockings that always hung every year along the staircase. And how am I going to make certain that I get the one that's mine that I had as a child, that my sister gets hers, and they get distributed appropriately back into the right family members? And you'd be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't, at how much those things matter to the families when they're going through the downsizing or after death process of getting the space ready for what's coming next.
Well, absolutely. I mean, that's sentimental. I mean, everybody has sentimental things, and they're not necessarily expensive, but, you know, to our hearts, they mean quite a bit. And by the way, I have my childhood Christmas stocking. Well, you would know that. And it is special to me. And so those are things that people struggle with. And it's great to know that there's someone that can help you through that process, right? Because it can be kind of dysfunctional, I guess, sometimes with families because they always don't agree. That would be difficult, right? People that are having struggles with different opinions of what things should be kept and what things should go. How do you handle it when you get involved in that type of situation? Do you step back and let them duke it out, or do you have a way to sort of make it a little smoother for them?
You know, it's a really great point that you're raising, and so much of our lives, whether it's in business or in our personal lives, it's the reason why big consulting firms exist for large corporations, because an independent point of view is often greeted without a level of defensiveness that comes when a peer may say, we should really be going to market differently in business, right? It's what Anderson Consulting does. It's what McKinsey does. And in our personal lives, sibling rivalries, even if they've been tamped down for many years, in moments of stress, and very often these are very stressful decisions, right, as you know.
Absolutely.
Now all of a sudden, the mom loved you better, and just because I'm the youngest doesn't mean that I don't have a point of view here. You know, I'm the baby in the family, and I'm 58 years old today. You know, but those roles somehow still emerge. So we help not only functionally, but we help emotionally really make the process as objective and as simple and as minimizing the emotional component of it, and keeping the emotions positive as opposed to negative as possible. And one of the ways you do it is you simply start out with the inventory. Here's what's there. Mom, who just relocated into a wonderful community in Boca Raton, is now taking these things, and now we need to figure out what's happening with the balance of the items. And at that point, a list can go to the family members, and the family members can start to divide amongst themselves. So it starts the process, and it gives us an opportunity to now ensure that, okay, there are 50% of the items that nobody wanted. Should we donate them back to charities? Are there charities that make the most sense? Of those things, are there things that actually have financial value? Sometimes they do, but I think the great myth and the great surprise for so many families is all these things that we spent money accumulating over the years, at the end of the day, it's just another Thomasville table. And, you know, there isn't a resale value on the Thomasville table, so it's not an opportunity to make money, is the point that we remind families of in most cases. Sometimes they're true collectibles, but, you know, as somebody jokingly once said to me, my mother loved those 200 Hummel figurines, but I didn't realize that they're worth a lot less to other people than they were to mom. So now we need to figure out what to do with them. In that case, we're there to help find the next home for them to the greatest degree possible. Sometimes things are refuse. Very often things are things that can be repurposed and donated back into the communities. And then there's usually a fair number of things that are distributed to family members and loved ones across the country. And by the time we're done, everything's found its home, and the space is ready for what comes next. It could be another family member that's moving in. It could be an apartment that is now going to become a rental unit or something that's going to be sold. But it's one of those things that, unfortunately, so much of what we deal with is sprung upon people. And my co-founder, Laura Oliveras, who actually started the predecessor to this company over a decade ago, really understood the importance of making certain that nothing was forgotten and that the space was ready and everything that had a potential place, whether it was with another person, a charity, or a family member, found its right way there. And people don't think about it. And most cases, by the way, simply calling got junk isn't the right answer, right? It's just not. And then we realize those things that, again, in most cases are happening far too late for most people to actually do something about. We can step in and make it a better process. And it's a rewarding thing to do, actually.
Yeah, rewarding for everybody, actually. That's great. I love that. We're going to take a break. Stay tuned. We'll be back, and have a pen and paper ready. We're going to give away a free book. You won't want to miss that. We'll be right back.
Somewhere at the corner of bewildered and confused is a lost mother, a father, a sibling, or grandparent. Wandering is a common symptom of Alzheimer's or related dementias and can often make those who care for a loved one feel just as lost. If you're looking for a place that's safe and secure, look to Arden Courts. Memory care is all we do. We know, we understand, we can help. To learn more, visit arden-courts.com. Arden Courts follows equal housing opportunity guidelines.
You are listening to your host, Marcia Teele, an Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert on caregiversolutions.info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
At this time, I'd like to thank our national sponsor, Arden Courts Memory Care Communities. Arden Courts is a leader when it comes to memory care. They take care of people that have memory problems, but they also take care of you, the family caregiver, by providing resources for you, this show included. Because you're watching this show and you are a family caregiver or a potential family caregiver, we'd like to offer you this free book. It's called The 36-Hour Day. It's a wonderful resource for family caregivers. It talks about Alzheimer's and dementia. It gives a lot of definitions, scenarios, tips, things that a caregiver would need to know. And so if you don't have this book, I would highly recommend it. If you're a caregiver for someone who can't care for themselves, especially if they're dealing with some form of dementia like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease, a vascular dementia, it really doesn't matter what kind. It's all memory loss. And all you have to do to get this book is just send an email with your name, address, and telephone number. And that email address is delray@arden-courts.com. That's DELRAY at Arden, ARDEN -courts, COURTS.com. Tell them that you heard about the free offer on the Caregiver Solutions info show, and they'll be happy to get the book right to you, and you'll be really glad that you did. And if you know a caregiver and they don't have this book and you think they would benefit from it, then get it for them. It would be a wonderful gift, and I'm sure it will be very well received. So I'm back with my guest here in the studio, Dan Laganni. He is the CEO and co-founder of Silver Solutions, silversolutions.com. And we're talking about aging gracefully, aging without so much stress in our life. And we all have stress and we are all aging. So it's a perfect topic for everybody, but especially for seniors and for people that are getting older and really needing to make some changes in their life. So we're talking about the different things that people can do to age in place safely or to look at a different type of living situation. So thank you, Dan, for all that great information. But you do more than all of that. And you actually talk about something called the friction zone. And I'd like you to explain what that means.
So the friction zone was a national survey that we did in December of 2020. And it started out really to help us understand our customers better so we could do a better job of, first and foremost, seeing where the decisions were made. Anecdotally, we always had a sense that it was somehow a battle between the adult children and mom or dad, but we didn't know for sure, right? And we didn't know what some of the underpinnings were. So we started out simply to try and understand our own consumers' behaviors better. And it turned into something that became so rich and so helpful, not only to our business and to our marketing efforts, and I'll share several of those points right out of the survey, but also just to help families understand the process of what they're going through in an easier way and in a more objective way. So the friction zone was really identifying what were the key stressors between a parent and a child as the parent was getting older. And it was a fascinating dynamic.
Oh, I'm sure, because there are a lot of stressors. I've been, helping seniors and working with families for 21 years now, and it's endless sometimes. And some families have more stressors than others, of course, but I'm sure that the survey really opened up some eyes. So tell me a little bit about those statistics, the ones that you thought were really mind-blowing, or maybe not, or some that maybe have changed over the years as the baby boomers are aging.
So the title of the presentation that came from the survey, the friction zone, kind of gives away one of the big parts of this, which is there's a lot of conflict in an almost laughable way. And I think that you have to sometimes look for the humor in some of the difficult and stressful things. I'm going to read you the few areas that children and their older parents agree on. And there are very few.
This is what they agree on.
These are the things that they agreed on.
Okay.
The general vicinity that they live in. And what I mean is 75% of the seniors, so this is a survey of 400 people, and to give you context, in media terms these days, a 400-person survey is a pretty good representative national survey, right? So we spoke to both adults over 65 and caregivers that had a parent or a loved one that they were responsible for in some way, shape, or form over the age of 65. And on a question that was as simple as, where do you live relative to your caregiver or to your adult child? The seniors said 75% of the times it was within 250 miles, and the caregivers said 90% of the times it was within 250 miles. So now the groups aren't 100% aligned, but it's pretty close, right? So yes, we agree that we lived generally within a certain area, right? And then it's, what type of home do you live in? The senior said, well, I live in a single family home, and they said it 80% of the times, and the caregiver said it 70% of the times. But when you start to move beyond those things, there's only two other places that they agreed on. The biggest safety issue at home was a slip and fall, and almost 9 out of 10 of both of those said, yes, a slip and fall issue is my biggest concern when it comes to safety. Later, I'll be able to share with you where the seniors disagree with that, even though they've said yes in one case. But the ultimate only other place that they agreed on before the friction really starts to kick in is that when we get into moments of major age-based decisions, both the family caregivers and the older adults both say they turn to family members for help as their first priority. So those seem like great. We've got a lot of areas of agreement, but boy, does it break down very quickly as soon as you start to ask questions that are a little more pointed, like, who's in charge here? Who's making the decisions? And then you start to see the beginning of several big areas of pretty significant disagreements, or the friction zone.
Well, I could see one already when you have a parent that might be really stubborn and they don't agree and they're not going to agree, or if you have a parent that has mild cognitive impairment or leading into a dementia, you cannot reason with a person that has dementia because, they are right in their mind, and, you're not going to change their mind. And so that causes a lot of friction. And I know that this is a big deal because the adult children or the caregiver, they're trying sometimes to reason with that loved one who might just be stubborn or might have some, mild cognitive impairment, and they are having a terrible time. And so the statistics that you're going to show, I'm sure that they're going to be pretty close to what we are experiencing. But then again, I'm sure there are some surprises too. So what are the biggest frictions that you found?
So it starts with the biggest one of all, which is who's in control here, right? And when you ask the seniors, and here's the actual question, when you're making important decisions about your lifestyle or your living environment, who is the final decision maker? Of the older adults, 53% said, I am the final decision maker on my own with no help from the outside. And only 3% said, my family makes the decision for me.
There you go.
Now, but here's the best part. When you ask the family caregivers that same question, where the senior said only 3% of the times is it being made without their involvement, the family caregivers said 73% of the times they are making the decision alone without the involvement of mom or dad or whoever the decision is being made for. It's profound.
It is. Very much so.
And, that is on a very fundamental issue. That's not who's going to choose the color of the wall or what kind of car we're getting. It's who's in control of my destiny at this point. So the emotionally charged elements that start to emerge there are pretty significant. And it goes right down the line now from who's in control to where are you going to live, right? And you think about all the issues, 82% of the seniors, when asked the question of where are you going to live?
I'm staying home.
I'm staying home.
I knew.
Absolutely.
Is so typical, and I'm staying right here.
Yeah.
I'm not going anywhere. I've been here forever, and I'll be fine,
Yep.
and you can't make me. And that you hear that all the time, all the time.
When you ask the caregivers that question, a full 50% said, no, they're going someplace else.
Yeah.
They're
Whether
going
they know
someplace
it or
else.
not, they're
That's
going,
right.
yeah.
But I think, in again, sort of almost in the humorous side of things, only 1% of seniors said they expected to live in their family's home as their next place. So only 1% said they expected to move in with family.
Oh, to move in together.
That's right.
Yeah, not like the olden days when generations of families lived together. It's not the same anymore, and that is definitely telling.
Yet of the caregivers, 22% said mom or dad or my aunt or uncle or my loved one is going to move in with me. So big disagreements of who's in control and where am I even going to live. So surprising, but anecdotally we saw it over and over again. But when you see the actual numbers that 20 times more likely that a family member believes that their mom or dad is going to move in with them than mom or dad believe that. They don't want to do it.
Well, a lot of adult children, they want to bring mom or dad or aunt or uncle in, but sometimes they don't really look at the ramifications of that, and they don't look to the future. What does that really mean, and how is it going to affect their family life with their spouse and their children and all the activities that happen? And so we really have to look at that if you are an adult child and you're looking at having a loved one, especially if they have memory loss, because that just is going to turn everything upside down. And, it's not that you don't want to and you love that person and you want to help them with all your heart, but sometimes you're not the best person to always help that person. You don't have necessarily the skills. You know that person, but maybe they've changed their personality because of dementia. And so these are things that, the survey is great, but you have all these other little things that, go into it that people really have to think about. So I love the fact that, you're surveying people and you're finding these discrepancies, because it gives food for thought, right, to families when they're talking about these different issues. Yeah. Anything else you want to add about that friction zone?
The next one was a really important learning for us, and even how we described our services, depending upon whether we were talking to an adult child or mom or dad. And if you remember, and by the way, I think it's helpful for any family member to understand the importance of what I'm about to mention as well, which is, I said earlier, once we got people to say, let's talk about safety, what's your biggest safety concern at home? Everybody universally agreed it's slipping and falling, tripping in the house.
Right.
But if you said, what are the things you worry about the most? Now you got a very different set of answers. So when you ask that question of the senior, only 15% said their physical safety. Their biggest issue was independence and isolation. I'm worried about losing my independence, and I'm worried about becoming isolated. 40%, by far the largest number. 30% said, I'm not worried at all. Now, whether they're in denial or not sure exactly what's changing or what's happening, to be determined. But when you ask the family caregivers, 50% said physical safety is the thing I worry about the most for my mom, my dad, my aging parent or loved one. And only a quarter, or 24%, said independence and isolation. So what we came to realize is, depending upon which constituent you're talking to, you're talking to the older adult about improvements and modifications and changes that need to be made so that they can age in place safely, you really want to emphasize the independence. These are the things that are going to allow you to stay here longer, where you want to be. If you're talking to the children, they're more concerned about, I live in New York, mom and dad live in Boynton Beach, and I'm worried about their safety. I'm worried that they've got throw rugs all over the house, and they're going to fall. So how do we deal with the safety issues? So just understanding the mindset of each side helps greatly, not only from a business perspective, but just managing expectations and managing the process internally amongst your own loved ones much more effectively.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That's really great information and some wise advice, which is going to help me segue into the next topic here called Agewise. You actually host a podcast called Agewise. I'm sure that the survey and all the information that you've accumulated helps you to disseminate this information on your Agewise podcast. So tell me the mission of the podcast and what are some of the things that people can expect from watching it?
So the primary mission of Agewise, beyond the nice packaging of, we're there to provide information that helps make growing older safer, simpler, and less stressful for both family members and their parents. The truth is, and I'm sure you experience this in your day-to-day, you've got collective wisdom of being in your professional role for tens of years at this point. You've done this program for many, many years, and you've accumulated a wealth of knowledge that most people will never have access to until they're in some moment of crisis. So the notion of Agewise was to say, we have so many interactions in our company, Silver Solutions, on a regular basis with family members, with other professionals in the elder care industry, in all facets. How do we take that information and make it more widely available? Because people by nature are not planners. They tend to get into what they're in the middle of as a caregiver by accident. Ironically, we completed a new family caregiver survey where we're now going to title it The Accidental Caregiver, because most people wind up there 55 to 60% of the times after an emergency and they haven't planned for what they're about to get involved in for the next 4 to 5 years. So the mission of Agewise was really to take that collective wisdom that exists and ensure that it was passed from generation to generation and from person to person in a seamless way and in a way that simply didn't have to be discovered only in a moment of emergency or crisis.
Well, you're right on there, Dan, because I've always said that, people don't plan to be a caregiver and they don't go to caregiver school, and they're usually just thrown into that role. That's why Caregiver Solutions Info Show was actually created, to give another educational platform. And I'm so glad that now we know about Agewise, and so we can work together to educate the families, the adult caregivers, the family members, like you said, the different generations, because it is a generational problem as we age. And so I love that you do this, and tell us when and how we can actually tap into the podcast.
So the Agewise podcast happens usually twice a month. You can find all of the episodes on silversolutions.com. Just go to the video tab and you'll see every one of the episodes that we have. Or you can go to the Apple podcast sort of icon, and simply in the Apple Store search Agewise, and you can find it and follow it that way.
Okay. So give me a couple examples of some of your programs you've recently had as far as guest on your Agewise, because obviously we have you here today on Caregiver Solutions because you're in that business and you have a lot of great information. And, we may have the same type of person because we're talking about aging, we're talking about caregiving, and so they are related very much so. And so I have always believed that the more information that somebody has, the better they're going to be prepared for what comes down the road. But you're right, sometimes they don't even seek it out until a crisis happens. So talk a little bit about some of the recent podcasts that you've addressed.
Sure. Some of them, in fact, I'm excited next week. I'm speaking with the dean of the School of Social Work at Boston University, who's done a lot of work professionally around hoarding. What the causes of hoarding behaviors are, and how to help people who have a parent or loved one that is living in a hoarded environment. So that's a very functional one. It's great educational information. And if you've ever been into a home or into an apartment where the person living there has hoarded, it's really a shocking thing the first time you see. And you have to also understand that in that case, simply just removing everything doesn't solve the problem, because it comes right back unless you deal with it the right way. But we deal with a wide range of topics. The most recent episode that we did was with a woman by the name of Skye Bergman, who now has a documentary on PBS called Lives Well Lived. So you can stream it. Skye's actually originally a Floridian. She lives in California. And it was just a wonderful conversation about how she inadvertently, through her grandmother, started to videotape and has documented 40 rich conversations with people between the ages of 75 and 100. So we do a span of things.
I love that. I actually videotaped my grandmother many times for, just to have that before she left. Well, today has been wonderful. It's been great to have you with us, Dan Laganni. Silversolutions.com. Check out the website because you'll find lots and lots of information. Thank you for being with us today, Dan.
Thank you for having me, Marcia.
And thank you for joining us today on the Caregiver Solution Info Show. You can also catch us on the YouTube. You can see archive shows. This show will be up on YouTube at another time. Also on local AM and FM radio in South Florida, 96.9 FM, 95.3, and 1470 AM, or on the iHeartRadio app under WNN. Thank you for watching today. We'll be back next week, same time, same place, every Tuesday at 6 p.m. with another wonderful show. Until then, stay safe, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us for this week's Caregiver Solutions with Marcia Teele. Join us next week as Marcia, who has 15 years of Alzheimer's disease and dementia care experience, brings you more needed information to help with the care of your loved one. This show can be seen again on caregiversolutions.info, and questions can be left on the site, which may be used on the program to help others. See you next week